Hello and Assalamu alaikum, Penny Appeal fam, IAR fam, and just everyone who's joining us tonight. Again, I am Rowena Basuni, and I'm the National Volunteer Coordinator at PA USA. Tonight is round 2 of our Wellness Wednesdays in partnership with the Islamic Association of Raleigh in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we are just here to provide you guys important conversations about overall wellness, inner child, shadow work, how to kind of tie in the importance of emotional and mental well-being with spirituality and all things above, to allow you to connect and network with professionals within the field with any questions or concerns you kind of have about the topic. So for tonight, we have an amazing speaker, Dr. Uzma Ali, who will be speaking with you guys tonight. And Dr. Ali has her degree and her bachelor's in special education and her master's and PhD in counseling studies. She has worked in higher education and student services for 16 years and has been a professor in psychology and sociology and social justice for 12 years. Her areas of focus within social justice have been in racism, sexism, and classism. When social injustices occur daily, it is inevitable for us as a society to respond to the personal biases and heightened emotions, quoted by Dr. Ali. As an educator with a background in counseling, Dr. Uzma focuses on discussing these difficult events in a safe and open platform, while also encouraging conversations to promote positive and mental health. For tonight's discussion, Dr. Uzma would like to discuss 2 main topics. The first being remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of everything. And then topic 2 would be emotional wellness and self-care. Dr. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you with us tonight.
Thank you so much, and Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Happy Ramadan to everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. So I just wanted to bring a few things to light that I'm seeing both in our community and as well as just within our own social circles and family, in relation to sometimes forgetting that we aren't in control, and just kind of remembering that Allah's in control of everything going on, around us. And we sometimes think we caused our own problems, we created some issues, or did not do all that we could in situations that may be thrown at us. So we're often hard on ourselves. And I've realized this a lot more during the pandemic, that we've been doing this, perhaps because we're home more often and we're not a part of, we're not in our daily routines of the go, go, go. Perhaps because we're around family more, perhaps because we have other demands now. But we do forget that Allah is in control, and by accepting His will, we are increasing our faith. So I really just wanted to kind of discuss that piece and kind of open up the floor to why we do this and how we can combat this, and discuss emotional wellness and self-care instead of self-defeating type of activities. And it's inevitable. Sometimes we can't help it. We're just, we feel like no one can help us, that we need to do everything by ourselves, that we are alone and we lack support. And perhaps there may be situations where we don't have individuals that are able to support us, but we tend to forget it. Allah's with us at all times. That is one of the ways where we can strengthen our iman and keeping faith in Him, and trying to put more of, I don't want to call it the burden, but more of the burden in knowing that our prayers are being answered, instead of saying, hey, I got this, I can do all of this, I'm a super person. It's a little bit easier to do that with putting the faith in Allah. So, again, some of our topics are going to be discussing how to prioritize mental health and being able to ask for help when needed. A very, very, very stigmatized topic in our community. We're going to also discuss various activities that we can engage in that may help enhance that mental wellness. So with that said,
So we actually do have a question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. No, please.
So we had a question actually come in, and it was, I'm sure you're about to cover this, but it had to do with like topic 1. And have you ever when a person feels like they've lost control, and how can you kind of gain that back? So I'll let you do your thing.
Yeah, that was actually one of my the questions that I often, we end up discussing amongst either formally or informally. But we often forget that outside of our five, daily prayers or our every day type of things, that there's other things that we can engage in. We can engage in zikr. We can engage in doing nafils and praying sunnahs. I know, especially now, because some of us do wake up for sahur, some of us don't wake up for sahur. I like to sometimes either take some maybe 10 or 15 minutes before or after sahur to just pray some nafils. And, it's quiet, it's just me time. That usually does help with at least starting the day that way. But more than anything, I read a quote the other day, and I think it's going to be very helpful. It said that He, as in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, controls your safety, your health, and your happiness. And in order to develop a deep, pure love for our Creator, we must acknowledge that we are helpless without Him. So every breath is in His control, and every heartbeat pumps with His permission. So I think bringing that into perspective and trying to understand that, and just being appreciative of knowing what is within our control, what we can, and finding those limitations as a human, I think will help us enhance finding that control.
Awesome. That's so true. It's, there's like an emotional and mental importance to things, but there's also that underlying factor, which is spirituality. And so it's really important that we learn how to balance and merge the two together.
Definitely.
Another question that we had was, when a person feels overwhelmed by all the things that are kind of going on in life in general, do you how do you respond to that? And is it like normal to feel overwhelmed, I guess is what they're trying to say, and just like a day kind of thing?
I think we're all in that boat right now, and especially in the past year, with so many new expectations. Parents are teachers are home. We're working from home, we're doing so many different things, and all of these types of scenarios that we weren't familiar with. I've realized the one thing that we have a hard time acknowledging again is trying to understand that all of these types of things are going to happen. They're going to continuously happen. This past year, I think, has been a perfect example of the unexpected hitting us. I can't put it in so many words, and it's been global, right? Living in situations where you're taking care of someone, or just being in a challenge where how many times have we tried to jump onto a meeting and our internet's not working, or we can't get to a certain place, or different types of things. So being overwhelmed is a part of life. We're very, very familiar with that. I think everything just went into kind of fast forward in the past year more than anything. And the aspect of spirituality, as you had mentioned, I think it's very important, because a lot of us necessarily do not combine religion and spirituality together. Sometimes individuals feel like they're two different aspects. And, doing tasbih or, doing, dhikr may not necessarily, be definitely their way of an outlet. However, there's other aspects of things where we can still acknowledge Allah and the beauty of Allah, and find that overwhelming, ways to find how to combat that feeling of overwhelmingness, such as taking 5 or 10 minutes to be out in nature. It's something Allah's given us, right? It's something, being able to take those breaths in, especially now that the weather is getting nicer, being able to step out. Granted, we have to be masked, but, being able to really see the beauty of Allah and perhaps even a different environment, because we all have been kind of stuck between our 4 walls or 2 or 3 houses of family and friends that we've been going to. Or even, practicing something like deep breath. And I know last week, Penny Peel on the Wellness Wednesday, they were talking about mindfulness. And, it's so important to have that aspect of mindfulness and being able to have those breathing exercises, even practicing yoga. I find myself a lot with yoga and I don't know when I started this, but, when they have their various things of saying Om, or I found myself saying Subhanallah or Alhamdulillah or Bismillah. It just kind of naturally came off my tongue. So, when the others are, perhaps reciting other things, it just was coming out naturally, which then became a routine. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, we're going to feel overwhelmed. We're going to feel the stresses of every day. The one thing that we really have to keep in mind is that we're not alone. And I don't mean that necessarily physically we're not alone, but Allah is with us. Allah is listening to every single last thing that we don't even bring to our lips sometimes. He hears it all. So definitely, I think exercising, getting yourself out there, reminding yourself that you're not alone. I think these are all really healthy ways to feel that these different tasks can be somehow definitely managed.
That's really good points. I mean, you mentioned going out and getting, like, the weather's finally getting nice, but then again, there's like pollen, and I'm just like, oh.
That's why I found like the mask has helped me a little with being out with the pollen.
Definitely. No, that's such a good point. I didn't even think of that. That's true. So, do you feel like, I know, like, some folks say, like, they put added pressure on oneself to complete tasks or expectations of others. You mentioned that it's important to not be to take a break, right? But there are those who are kind of like have that mentality of like perfectionism, which it's not like a bad thing, right? But it also adds this insane pressure on oneself and to complete these tasks or to just kind of like receive some sort of validation for the expectations of others. And so I guess the question is, how can one seek validation within themselves rather than seeking that validation in order to kind of like appeal to the other?
Right. That's an excellent, topic. And I think we're all in some way, shape, or form in some area in our life, we like perfectionism. And the one thing that I've noticed in a lot of suggestions when it comes to coping with stress, people say, oh, you should go and organize and clean. And yes, that's a wonderful thing. It helps, but sometimes it's not necessarily helping. It may create more of a burden. So taking breaks, definitely. And again, I found even if you take 5 minutes or even 2.5 minutes, some of us have these wonderful smartwatches that tell us to breathe in the middle of the day. And again, I've also somehow in my brain, when it tells me to breathe, I usually take a breath in and I'll do some sort of zikr or I'll say something that's very positive. And you bring up a really good point in terms of like affirmations. We forget to engage in self-affirmations. We forget that we're great. Allah created us, subhanallah. Like we do so much in a day, and that's aside from like all the expectations of work and just the home things. Mashallah, we're amazing. It's just that we forget to tell ourselves that, Allah made us this way. And the stresses do often have a negative effect on our own self-esteem, which is, again, that's what happens with anxiety and depression. We become self-critical. We become self-destructive, whether it's through thoughts or words. And that's when we really need to take those breaks, as you had mentioned. Some of the things that I was, Yaqeen Institute does a wonderful little thing on coping mechanisms. And I find myself seeing those same techniques over and over again in like research journals and everywhere. And one of them is visiting someone sick. Right. And I know sometimes people are like, oh, it's a burden, you don't want to go out there. And with COVID, you don't want to get them sick. And, I have to drive or whatever. And now with the beauty of Zoom and FaceTime and all these other platforms, it's very rewarding to visit someone sick, taking 15, 20, 25 minutes out of your day to perhaps just make that phone call, or maybe joining a Zoom iftar with your family or friends. It breaks your day up because sometimes we don't have that control. And sometimes we are hard on ourselves that, okay, I didn't get to do 8 of the 10 tasks that I had, scheduled myself for. So breaking up the day, having some sort of, again, practicing deep breathing or visiting someone sick. The one thing that I get told a lot by many of my friends is just do something nice for someone, drop off a candy bar for someone who, and again, you can't go inside, leave it in the mailbox. It just is very, very self-affirming. It gives you self-fulfillment. You're helping the ummah, you're helping the people of Allah. And it's giving you an opportunity to say, okay, hey, yes, I've been caught up in this all day. I'm doing this for myself. So it gives you some building of your self-esteem. God knows it's one thing that gets me through my week. If I didn't have, the ability to do that or just, provide a quick text message of, hey, just checking in, it breaks up your day. And I definitely think that it takes off some of your own pressure of some of the things that you may not be physically able to get to. So I definitely would recommend that, for anyone.
Those are awesome points. And I think that, you mentioned something about like this whole trend of like organizing and cleaning, and it's become like this trend that I'm now going to be an organizer, or I'm going to be this and all this stuff. Like, for example, yoga has become like this trend. And I read a quote one time that a therapist had mentioned, and it was saying procrastination it's like, be curious about your emotions generally, and to look into like why you're like you feel this procrastination towards something. It's your body telling you that it doesn't like this. So for example, just because society tells you to get into organizing or to get into yoga or to whatever it may be, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the answer for you, right? And
exactly.
So the many different approaches that you mentioned are so important, because a lot of times we get lost in kind of like what social media is telling us to do, what society, these societal standards of mental wellness or overall what our body needs or what we need. And it's like, no, figure out what you enjoy to do, what you like to do, and do it. And, I personally, a therapist I worked with myself mentioned that, yoga, for example, or whatever it is that you do to find relief is something that you do when you need relief. Correct. So that doesn't mean that you have to do it every single day. And if you don't do it every single day, then like, you're just like horrible, you're not consistent or whatever it may be. It just means it's something that you need to do when it's needed. So I'm really, I think those are really important points that you brought up. And then I guess that kind of leads into like, so it's important to provide self-care for ourselves, but is it also important to receive care? Like, are we willing to take that help when we're needed? I guess is the next.
Yeah. That's so true. That's such a great point. And I think we often, and again, I'll be the first one to admit, I'm not a hypocrite. I'll be the first one to admit I have a very hard time taking help. And it's just one of those things that the way I have started to break free of that, because we are taught, at least on the Western side of the world, to be very independent, to find out and figure things out on your own. And I always say we have that like, oh, I got this attitude. And that's wonderful to a point where you're not abusing yourself. Right. So, and again, I'm going to put this out there. I don't want to be a hypocrite because I have been guilty of this, but asking for help, there's been times, when things have gotten a little too overwhelming, and, why do we hesitate? Like I've found, speaking to many of family and friends, we even hesitate asking in dua for Allah. Like Allah says over and over again, ask me, right? And here we are hesitating, like, no, I'll figure it out. And then that kind of goes back into remembering that Allah is in control. So I think it's very important that we stop and step back and very, 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 the one lesson that I've learned through this past year is assessing the capacity of how much you can take, the ability of how much you can give, and then being able to actually say, okay, you know what, I'm going to step back and say, hey, I can't get groceries this week. You need to help out. Hey, I need to get this off of my chest. I need you to speak with me with a non-judgmental type of attitude. Maybe I just need you to listen. I need to vent. Or even saying, hey, I need 20 minutes every single day to do that yoga, to take that drive, to step outside and just go up and down my block and just walk. But being able to ask for it. I think we think it's selfish, but it is actually very selfless, because the one hardest thing that we don't realize until it's too late is that when we're suffering from this anxiety, when we're suffering from these feelings of being overwhelmed and not asking for help, it's not us that are just us that are suffering. It's our loved ones that are suffering around us too. And like I said, I know this because I've been told many a time I don't ask enough for help. And all this time I've been thinking, no, I just don't want to burden you. But in reality, these friends and family members of mine are also, they feel like they're suffering because they see me suffering. So I think that, like you said, it is just as important to ask for that help. It is just as important to stop and really do a self-assessment, which again, I think we've been forced to do in the past year. Really assess our levels, our threshold of stress, and really stop and ask ourselves, can you really spread yourself this thin? And if you can, how long can you do it for before you feel like you're going to break? That I think is very, very important in terms of asking for help.
Great points. We actually had a question that asked, is there a right or wrong way to cope with anxiety?
Okay, so I like when you were speaking earlier, in terms of like the yoga, right? And it's wonderful that, we have all of these wonderful things on YouTube now and Netflix and all of these other platforms. But if you don't feel like doing it, if your heart's not in it, then it's not necessarily the healthiest way of coping with anxiety. So my answer to that is, again, it kind of goes hand in hand with self-assessment. My biggest coping mechanism is driving. I love to drive. I will drive till I can't drive anymore. And 99% of the people that I know hate driving. So to them, they can't wrap their head around it. And I'll be like, no, go take a drive. And they're like, you're absolutely nuts. That is healthy for me. That is insanely unhealthy for them, So it kind of goes into like what you were saying about practices like yoga, practices like, maybe you're not a nature person. Maybe you do have allergies. It does, it's not healthy. So I think the right way to cope with anxiety is, is definitely having a full understanding of what makes you feel better as a person, what makes you closer to Allah, what makes you, feel like you're actually getting somewhere. You're not just going through the motions of yoga. You're not going through the motions of, again, whether it's volunteering, you're not just doing, your heart, definitely has to feel like, you feel like you're going into it. Even visiting someone sick. If you feel you're not emotionally ready for that, you can't do that. That's definitely not a healthy way. And as far as feeling guilty for having anxiety or lack of trust in Allah's plans, it's something we all kind of battle with. And I think it's very important to understand that Iman is something that's kind of like, we have our highs and our lows. Sometimes we're very spiritual, we're practicing, we're great, we feel very connected to Allah, everything is wonderful. And then sometimes we feel very disconnected, right? And no matter what you do, sometimes you can't find that connection. And that's when we can either start falling or we can start looking for different methods and mechanisms to bring ourselves closer to Allah. But unless you try these things like zikr, unless you try these things like praying sunnah and nafil, unless you continuously appreciate the things around you, you're not going to be able to know what's going to work for you and what's going to bring you back to that path of Allah. The one thing, my sister-in-law is absolutely amazing. And what she does is every single night she has a journal and she writes down 3 things that she was appreciative of in that day. It could have been like a cookie, and maybe not even her favorite cookie, but it's something that she appreciated for those, for that day, for those 24 hours. Something like that, journaling can definitely help you come to both the perspective of understanding what works for you and what doesn't. And it can also help you do some self-assessment, like, hey, I didn't realize this really brought me joy, or I didn't realize I'm really lucky to have this one thing in my life. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could be something really, really small and insignificant. I run late to work, and now I just have the attitude of maybe Allah saved me from a potential car accident. Maybe Allah saved me from a potential speeding ticket. Who knows, right? It's one of those things. Another thing I do recommend is something like reading, coloring books. They seem like they're like, what are you talking about? But they take you out of that mental stress for half a minute or whatever amount of time you're doing. And yes, you're probably still thinking because it's hard to unplug, but it does give you something a little bit newer to do while you're thinking. And may Allah guide all of us in coming back to his path. May Allah always give us some sort of sign that helps us, open that up, that pathway of bringing us back to that path of Allah. However, I don't think the guilt is going to help with the anxiety. I think willingness to want to find that path again and willingness to always say, hey, I need to improve myself is the pathway to Allah. And that's the beauty of our religion too, right? When we think that we are perfect and we can't get ourselves any better, that's when there's something is wrong. So instead of feeling guilty, it's actually a blessing knowing that, hey, I need to still make some self-improvements to bring myself closer to Allah. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, those are great points. I did want to touch up on the coloring books that you mentioned and the journaling, but mainly the coloring books. So, oh, yay, they're happy. So a lot of times, like, coloring books are, again, one of those trends that have come out, but sometimes trends ruin good things, right? And so people think that or assume that just because I'm coloring, like you mentioned, you'll get out of it, but there has to be some groundwork that takes place, right? And so can you talk a little bit more on how to kind of like get grounded and to just woosah for a second?
You're right. Absolutely. My husband brought me a bunch of coloring books years ago when he probably realized that I was starting to really lose my mind. So I thank him. May Allah bless him for that. And I found myself, initially I was just coloring for the sake of coloring. And I'm like, I can't go out of the lines and every single thing has to be. And then I was like, this is really defeating the purpose, right? So I found myself, again, getting up either 10 or 15 minutes early for Fajr, or after or before any other prayer that works for you, and just sitting. We have a coffee table next to where we pray, and I would just leave it there, and I would take like a few minutes just to color. And then I would pray, or I would get back to work or whatever I was doing. And those 2 to 3 minutes were just for coloring, right? It's like a mental break telling yourself, okay, I am tasking myself to try to kind of, this is it. I'm not doing this because it's a trend. I'm not doing this because I have to and because I have a few minutes to kill, but I would just kind of built it into my prayer schedule, like right before, after. And it's so reminiscent of when I first started to do yoga and they tell you, okay, I'm going to ask you to clear your mind for 10 seconds. And you're like, it's 10 seconds. I got this. And those 10 seconds are like the longest 10 seconds of your life. And, you're like, you end up getting stressed out more because you can't stop thinking. So it's a practice. That's what I realized, because even that yoga for those first few sessions was more stressful to me, because I couldn't unwind for those 10 seconds, whatever I did. The only thing that helped me get there was practice. Practicing, okay, I'm going to focus on breathing, even if it's for 30 seconds. I'm going to focus on, just this odd color, even if it's for 10 seconds. but that practice is what's really going to help us break free of that, willingness of just going through with, like you said, these trends. Unfortunately, they are trends, and baking is one of them. We've all gained this COVID weight.
Hey, as long as it makes you feel good, that's all that matters.
That's true. And that's the positive and negative thing about anxiety, right?
Yes, exactly. It's and I think I wanted to just make a comment that, and I realized it in myself when you were speaking. It's just like, these coloring books, they're so pretty, and like on social media, like, ooh, and then you go buy it, and you're like, wait, do I put the green here? Or do I put the, and you just start stressing, and you're just like, no, just grab a red and color wherever. That's the point of it, is just, and then it's crazy because in Florida, just like a couple months ago, a guy placed a banana on the wall in here. $250,000 later, he's rich.
He's rich, exactly.
You never know your hidden art.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I mean, it's funny because and I've noticed this in my coloring books. The first 5 pages are really neat and pretty. Forget that. After that, none of it makes sense because it makes sense in my head, and that's all that matters.
Those are really good points. So a lot of there has been conversations around mental health and wellness, and then coaching, and a lot of folks, like I've had personal friends in my life who have said I've seek counseling. I've went, and either they've had a bad experience with their counselors and they just kind of like looked at them like they're crazy, quote unquote, is what they said.
Right.
That word, but just quoting them, or they just went for a while, it was good, and then now they're just like, okay, what's next?
Correct.
So what recommendations would you have for folks who have, one, so I guess we'll go to point one, they just didn't have any luck with a good counselor. Like what should they look for when it comes to seeking that professional help? And then point two is when it comes to, I've done the counseling, but now I just need to know how I can actually put this into action. Should they, is this still something that they participate in with their counselor, or should they go see like a life coach?
Okay, really, really good points. The first thing, and I think it's extremely important, we often have, when we finally have convinced ourselves that we're going to seek counseling, or we need some help, or we're going to go to therapy, we put a lot of weight and pressure on this individual that we're going to be seeing because we think they're going to fix us. And that's the unfortunate truth. That is the word. We're going to be fixed. We're going to be fine. However, and this kind of ties into the second question you asked, it's very much so the work of both individuals, the person getting the client and the counselor. And we have to go in with that perspective that we're not just going to go in there, tell our story, expect answers and solutions, and walk out and have a happy life. And I mean, that's how, unfortunately, counseling has been romanticized, unfortunately, due to movies and books and et cetera. It is just as much as work for you as a client as it is for a therapist. And the one thing you want to look for when you are researching these counselors, a lot of them have bios, a lot of them have, I would focus on the bio more than some of the comments from people because everyone has different results. You can look up their type of therapy that they provide. A lot of them do behavioral therapy. And you could do a simple Google search. Honestly, it just takes a few minutes of your time to see what type of therapy these therapists are practicing. If you feel like it doesn't align with you, I would move on to the next one. The one thing that I have realized, even when I was, I would say shopping for a good therapist, was I called the therapist, I had a conversation with them, and actually like almost did like a mini interview, kind of saying like, these are the type of goals that I'm looking for. These are the type of issues, obviously not going into great depth because you don't want to give all of your information, but you do want to see how they would ask you to, how you would be working with them. Are they someone who tells you, these are solutions and you should walk away and do them? Or do you want to work with someone who says, hey, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to ask you to come to this conclusion, and then we're going to set goals together. So you also have to see what you would prefer. Often I've realized, like, between work and school, I like the approach of walk me to a couple of different solutions and then let me pick. That works best for me. And then we can come up with goals together. So I think understanding the approaches of counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and also understanding the difference between the three, a psychiatrist versus a psychologist versus a counselor, who can prescribe medications, who is more of a clinical person. Are you going to a private practice versus are you going to an agency? Can you have telehealth? These are the type of things that may make a big difference to you. If you are going in person, are you willing to travel 10, 15, 20 minutes? And I say this because sometimes when we're not feeling the most wonderful, getting into a car and traveling for even 10 minutes, if you're depressed and you're feeling anxious, you don't want to do that. So having that option of having telehealth or even a phone consultation, these are really, really important things that we want to look at when we're looking for therapists. And then with that said, it's also important to understand that when you are going into these sessions, I always take a notebook with me. I found myself writing things that may not necessarily be what the counselor was or the therapist was recommending, but it was just something that was insightful to me that I said that, hey, I want to focus on this later. I always keep a notebook with me for that reason, because there are times when something comes up in my mind and I'm like, oh, I'm going to forget about this. Write it down, bringing it up in a session, bringing it up in, even if you're not going to professional help, just bringing it up to a friend you can rely on or family, just being able to document it somehow, that definitely can help you find out, figure out what your goals are, number one. And number two, allow you to work through these sessions more efficiently, because sometimes we are paying out of pocket. So you don't want to just be there for an hour, either listening or just talking. You want to be able to get something out of it. So go in with some questions, go in with some ideas, go in with some concerns, but be willing to also listen and do something about those. So if you're being given homework, which a lot of us counselors do, we will give you homework, which is sometimes just writing. Be ready to say, I'm going to devote Wednesday at 4 p.m. for half an hour on this homework. Take it just as seriously as you would for your work, as you would for your salah, as you would for your prayers. Your self-care is just as serious as any other obligation in your life. So please prioritize that. Take these things seriously. These sessions, even getting help with your friends, these are all very, very valuable. And you may not feel like they're valuable right now because you're like, oh, I'm just talking. They will help you. It is the top priority of your self-care. So definitely engage in something that's efficient for both you and the therapist.
So I guess this leads to the famous question of a person asked, what are your opinions of there we go.
There we go. So fantastic question. We all have this problem, right? Like, especially with our caretakers, our elders, even sometimes our siblings, they'll ask us like, why are you getting counseling? And again, we use the word crazy. You're not crazy, you're crazy, this, that. We just kind of throw it around because it's just a word that we do use. And I think it's very, very important that I can't quote it because I don't have the exact quote on me, but there is mention in a lot of hadiths, a lot of Quranic scriptures that does emphasize self-care and taking care of ourselves, whether that's physically or mentally. I mean, we just look at the month of Ramadan, right? If we're not feeling up to it, whether mentally or physically, we are exempt. There are options. And I think that's kind of goes hand in hand with counseling also. I think that we as an ummah, as a community, as a society, we really need to come together and eradicate the stigma, because that word crazy has just spread like wildfire. And we all suffer from stress. We all suffer from anxiety and depression at some point in our life, whether we like it or not. We can be the most calm, collected person. We're all going to suffer, through some adversity. SubhanAllah, Allah sends it to us for a reason. And some people do feel like they find more solace and comfort in just ibadah and zikr, but for some people that's not enough. And I think being able to say that to our family and our friends, saying that, yes, I'm engaging in all of those things, but I need this extra help. I need to bring myself to this point in order to be where I need to be, which kind of goes in hand with communication. I kind of wanted to mention that in the very, very beginning. If we're not openly communicating with these people that in our lives that are important to us, that may be showing some judgment, that in itself, is going to create bigger issues for us. So being able to communicate that and say, whether it's counseling, whether it's just therapy or just professional help, or even getting medications if needed, whatever is needed, yourself best. And expressing this to our loved ones and trying to eradicate that stereotype of stigma, it's only going to happen through communication. And I'll tell you this from my personal experience, both as a counselor and as a client, you're going to be repeating yourself a lot. You're going to find yourself saying, hey, I need this help. I need this help. I love you for all of the advice you're giving me and all the suggestions, and you can say that to me as well. However, you know yourself best. You know your limits and your thresholds, kind of going back to what we were saying before. So, that's really the only way. We need to talk about it. We need to discuss it. We need to also focus on, we have a lot of multicultural counseling out there. We don't hear about it a lot because we don't think it's there. So finding a lot of, therapists and counselors that may or may not be your culture or your religion, or even similar, like a similar type of thing, that are working with minorities, you'll find it's very, very helpful. And even being able to talk to your loved ones and saying, hey, look, there's a lot of multicultural counseling out there. It's specifically for addiction counseling, marriage counseling, family counseling, whatever it may be. It's out there. It's just a matter of us kind of putting it out there. And if you're scared, and which I can understand, and you're anxious, you ask Allah for strength. Trust me, strength is the least we can ask for. Allah will give you strength, and it's just a matter of communicating with your loved ones. And I promise you, like I said, you'll be repeating yourself, but you'll get to a point where either they're going to understand or they're not, but you have to self-prioritize. That is part of self-care.
Those are really good points. It's not, like you mentioned, it's for some people spirituality works, and that's a lot of the older generation they grew up in a completely different country, a completely different environment. And so for them, that's their sanctuary. That's their way of self-caring. But what our parents in certain generations fail to realize is that we're juggling we're trying to balance two different cultures.
Yes.
And two different mentalities, two different concepts. It's like, it's all over the place. So I think it's so important that you said, like, standing your ground in something important like this is very, very much so needed. And a question that another person asked is, sometimes I feel guilty for having anxiety. Does this mean it's having a lack of trust in Allah's plans? And what kind of are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very common for us to feel that way, that we don't trust Allah's plan, or the shaitan is kind of overtaking our iman. Anxiety is just not something any one of us say, hey, come get me. Nobody ever invites anxiety. And I think it's very important when we talk about having trust in Allah and the control in Allah. These things are coming from Allah, right? Allah sending us these things, whether as a lesson or an adversity, just to make us stronger. I think it's very, very important that we realize it's a cycle, that Allah sends us this for a reason. And then how do we respond or react to it, right? That really says a lot. And it may not be an immediate reaction. You don't have to necessarily say, "Oh my gosh, I'm feeling anxiety. I have to sit down on the on the prayer mat and get over this anxiety." It doesn't work like that. Alamida's human. We're not machines, and it's a process. So yeah, initially we're human. We're gonna feel guilty. It's inevitable. And again, it kind of goes into that whole piece of understanding that we have to still make self improvements, right? So that kind of goes hand in hand in that. But also taking into perspective that yes, we feel guilty, but yes, we have faith that we're going to get better. But yes, we have hope that whether it's spiritual or religious, that we're going to get through this. That Allah is with us, that Allah is in control. Having that strong belief and that strong, again, even if it's spiritual, having that is something that can definitely help us overcome those moments of guilt. It's inevitable, definitely.
Good, really good points. The famous question now. What are your thoughts and recommendations when it comes to men? And should one seek a natural approach to things? Should one go on medication? Should one do all the above? What are your opinions on that?
So this is such a hot topic right now, especially because, again, I talk a lot about COVID because I feel like it's changed our lives. And the beauty of YouTube and the beauty of so many different things has allowed us to come up with so many concoctions at home and, create like meditation studios in our homes and, just so much going on. So to be very honest, I am not partial to either or. I'm a firm believer that everyone has their own something that works for them, right? For some people, natural healing works. For some people, medication works. For some people, it's a combination. It's a hybrid of the two, right? So it really is a matter of what my recommendation to all people is starting with the counseling aspect of things and getting it out of your system and talking with someone. That I think is the most important thing. And I think that's why I went into counseling and not necessarily psychiatry, because I didn't really think, I thought the medication and the other causes came second for me, at least. So I really feel like having those conversations with someone you trust, having those conversations with Allah, doing these self-assessments and understanding who you are, why you are, where you are, what you're doing, what's making you feel this way, what's triggering these feelings. I think getting to the bottom of that is the most important thing. I think that's priority. The next step, I would definitely think, for me, sleep. So I know it's something, it has nothing to do with like medication, non-medication, right? But if we don't get enough sleep, we're not going to be thinking straight enough to understand and answer some of these questions. It's a very, very simple thing. And I know with Ramadan right now, we're all feeling it, not getting enough sleep. However, I think it's an essential part of self-care and getting better and healing for whatever you're going through. So if you do need natural products to help you sleep, I'm completely for that. It's something that you really need. It's a basic necessity. Eating well, that's also a basic necessity. We have our cheat days, we have our junk days, and that's what they should be. A day, a week, that's fine. We all deserve to be happy. But we need to put in good in order to have a clear mind. Drinking our water, obviously, again, because of Ramadan, we're not necessarily there. But these things all go hand in hand. I have a very firm belief of the biopsychosocial model, which really means your biology, you're doing well with your body, you're keeping your mind a little bit more healthier because of that. And the social aspect of things, like I had said, talking with people, understanding that not everyone is necessarily going to understand your situation, but get your issues or get your difficulties and challenges out, just to be able to, even if it's on paper, just get them out of your mind. So I definitely think that, and if need be, I am not against medications. I think medications, they're here for a reason. But I do definitely highly recommend you do your research, right? And we have everything at our fingertips now. So that really is the order of things that I usually recommend. And sometimes depending on the severity of someone's symptoms, it doesn't have to be in that order. It could be in a different order. It really depends on, number one, getting that help. So someone can help you come to that conclusion. I always compare it to like going into a doctor's office. I like to take someone with me because we need that second set of ears, right? So it's kind of like that. You may be thinking something horrible, and then when you say it out loud and the person sees, hears it too, and then you realize, okay, it's not so bad. So having that person to bounce that off of, it'll make a world of a difference. And, reaching for those natural remedies, even reaching for those medications, but still focusing on the basics: water, sleep, good food. I think that really will help.
That's important to take baby steps.
Yeah.
I would agree. Like, well, that's what works for me personally, I would say, and just like herbal adaptogens. So if anyone wants to try those out, they're great. Always go to a nutritionist or like doctor before you do that. And so I guess our last question before we kind of wrap it up for tonight, inshallah, is, so we've talked about all these different situations and what to do and how to approach and all this great stuff. Now, the action. So if I want to take that action to better build that relationship with my friends or my family members, or kind of get back out there, what are the steps I need to do to help get myself out of that comfort zone?
I think first things first is recognizing that you are in a comfort zone, right? Recognizing that you need help. Recognizing that all of those things we talked about in the beginning, that you're one person, right? And you may have higher expectations than those around you. And I think we're often hard on ourselves. So being able to break free of all of these things, assuming that the other person is being burdened, kind of ridding of these very self-destructive things, assuming the people around us, oh, no, they don't want to be bothered, they need their space, kind of getting rid of these assumptions, communication. And a lot of us are not very talkative. I get it. So it may start with one friend. It may start with some one person that you can trust, a family member, anyone. It could just be even a forum, a chat online that you feel, a discussion board that you don't even have to reveal yourself to. But just bringing to light that this is the issue, that I need to come out of this. I'm having this, this problem, or figuring out what is that thing that's triggering you or upsetting you. So I think that really is the first step, and it could be a long step. It can take some time to kind of work through that. And then, that's at more of a micro level. And then as you grow and you've realized and you've become more comfortable, I have a very, very dear friend who's wasn't comfortable in social settings, and she really pushed herself, put herself in uncomfortable settings, and did not necessarily feel the greatest. But at the end of the day, after a few weeks of forcing herself, and I would say torturing herself, she really felt that, hey, okay, this is what I like. This is what I absolutely do not like. But again, there's only one way to find out, right? We need to talk about it. We need to communicate about it. We need to figure out and really get to the bottom of these issues. And more than anything, I know it's hard because it's multitasking. We need to focus on self-care. It's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves daily. We don't live in a very easy society, and it's not getting any easier. So, being able to say, in order to get to that point, I need to say, I'm going to focus on me for X amount of time. I'm going to do a 5-minute breathing exercise. I'm going to walk outside. I'm going to go check up on my elders. I'm going to go, like I said, drop off a piece of candy to my friend. I'm going to go take a ride in the car. Just anything that you think will make you feel better. Don't forget that. Don't let the routine take that away from you. Please, whatever it is, it could be something as silly as that banana thing from that guy in Florida. Whatever it is, coloring books, just find that one thing, and don't let it go. Let that be that one thing you look forward to. Give yourself something to look forward to. And then the rest, you work through, and don't be so hard on yourself. So, I think that's how I've overcome a lot. It's been a very challenging couple of years for us too. Just for everyone else's is, information. I lost my mom two months ago now. It's been so finding that mental space to be able to say, hey, I'm grieving, but I still have work to do, and I have a life to live, and a family, and my dad, and being able to be in 10 different places. And I can't do it without the people that I love and love me around me, and those few very weird things that I like to do, like driving and coloring books. And I can't do it without those things. So don't forget what makes you happy, and do it, even if you're doing it alone. Just do it.
Very beautifully said. Great points. Just take a chance.
Yeah.
The worst could happen. Like I know I had a great mentor, and even within my workplace at Penny Appeal, my manager used to actually Osama, our CEO, used to actually yell at me and say, "You're not confident in your questions. You need to be confident in your questions. Don't be shy, And so now he just can't get me to shut up.
Yeah. That's a wonderful thing.
I had a manager, so it can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just, I think you said it very great, getting out your comfort zone, taking those chances, because you'll never know. Either it's not necessarily that you fail, you just have to figure out what it is that you need to do to get to where it is that you need to be. So
yeah,
it's very well said.
I think the one last thing that I'd love to leave everyone with is I used to be very, very anxious growing up, extremely. Like if I was on time, because I like to be early everywhere, if I was on time somewhere, I would just not go because I was not early. Really anxious. But over the years, I've realized I think about the worst case scenario that can happen, absolute worst case scenario that can happen. And I think that Allah has me, because Allah has really seen me through some of the most difficult things that I could never even have imagined that has happened, And I just am like, okay, the worst case scenario is going to happen. And I just breathe through it. Alhamdulillah, that worst case scenario has never happened in my 40 plus years. However, it has allowed me to calm down and understand both that my faith in Allah is strong enough, and also my mind is in my control now. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Uzma. We really appreciated having you today. I think, a lot of the comments, a lot of questions were answered, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of, your evening to join us to speak. Guys, definitely keep a lookout. Dr. Uzma may be joining us in the future. And if you have any questions, we could just reach out to me, and we can definitely connect them to you, Dr. Uzma, for any further concerns they may have.
Inshallah. Jazakallah so much for allowing me to be on this platform. And thank you all for tuning in and asking such great questions. May Allah always reward you. Thank you.
Sister.
Wa alaikum salam.
All right, guys. So that is a wrap for round 2 of Wellness Wednesdays. Make sure you join us next week, inshallah, at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will have amazing professions, as well, like Sister Uzma, who will talk about amazing other topics. So we'll see you all soon. Assalamu alaikum.